This is Heart.of.an.Immigrant, where we discuss the immigrant experience, the intricate assimilation process, and the ways in which we stay connected to our roots and culture. Join me as I explore the stories of guests who share their personal journeys, shedding light on the challenges and triumphs of navigating a new land while holding on to their identity. For many, it is an emotional and spiritual journey as we rediscover the essence of who we are and the resilience it takes to honor our heritage in a world of constant pressure. This is where our stories unite us in a shared celebration of perseverance and the enduring spirit of belonging. On today's episode, I have Talia Molé, an activist, anthropologist, and artist dedicated to social change. She speaks on mothering as a home and the gift of the in-between space. Listen in, you might see yourself in these themes of self-discovery and empowerment through her story. Let's get into it.
Thank you for having me, and my name is Talia Molé. I am an artist, activist, anthropologist, and I'm excited to sit here with you today. Some people might call me also a word doula, as I am currently, my artistry, I am expressing it via writing at the moment in the last few years. So I don't think I necessarily have yet to consider myself a writer, but I like word doula. So we can go there.
And how are you in relationship to the immigrant experience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I guess to be a bit candid with your listeners, you sent me these wonderful questions and I was reading them, and it had me sit with topics that I really hadn't sat with for a while. And I think this one, especially the one about the immigrant experience, there was a reconciliation that occurred a couple years back, probably when I started my dissertation, and after finishing it, just the evolution of it. But I would say that the very quick answer to that, how I reconciled the immigrant experience, would probably be by pushing on language a lot and pushing on narratives that didn't allow for my expansion, that didn't allow for me to fully express myself. The more nuanced answer would be, I was born in the Dominican Republic, and my father's Dominican. My mother is Cuban exiled. And they actually met in Costa Rica while they were studying and then moved to the DR, and I was born there. And when I was around 8 or 9, we moved here. Actually, my mom moved here, my father stayed over there. About maybe like a year later, my parents get a divorce. And so I'm living here in the United States with my mom and my little sister. And I don't really I go back to the DR up until I was 18. And I don't necessarily find a huge connection, right? I'm raised by my mom and my Cuban family, of course. And even though I was born in the Dominican Republic, I just didn't feel like I was necessarily from there. So when I was older, to really understand this, the last time I really stepped foot in the island of the Dominican Republic was when I was 18. I'm 44 now. When I came to understand, like when people ask me, where are you from? I always say Cuban. I've always said Cuban. Now, the thing is, because my mom is exiled, I have never stepped foot in Cuba because they're, in the 80s, if you had a U.S. passport, it was just hard to go back to Cuba, and there was a lot of persecution if you went back. And also just various embargoes, So it's always been hard for me to actually visit the island. Maybe in the near future, I'll be able to do that. But going back to me saying that I'm from somewhere that I've never seen, And funny enough, I have all of these Cuban memories that are not necessarily mine. They're my mother's and they're my mom's family, my family. And on top of that, that layer of exile. So they're my Cuban memories of exile that are not fully mine. They're my mom's, right? And to add another layer to all that, I live in a country that doesn't accept me, which is the United States. Being a Caribbean woman, a woman of color, a woman, period, I received and have still to this day a lot of racial tension, very negative things. We don't need to go into that. So having these three very real, how would you call them? I guess experiences to navigate, being from a land that I don't necessarily relate to, which is the Dominican Republic. I don't even speak with a Dominican accent when I speak in Spanish. It's very Cuban. People would say I am Cuban. So I have this land where I was born that I don't really feel a connection to. I live in a country that doesn't really accept me, and I don't relate to it either. I don't really relate to the United States at all. And I say I'm from a country, my mom's country, that I've never stepped foot in, and the memories I have are not really even my own, even though I feel them. So going back to my original answer, which is pushing back on language, pushing back on narrative, it was really during my dissertation work that I began to wanting to sort of find this idea of home. What does this mean? My dissertation, my Ph.D. is in anthropology and social change, activist anthropology and social change. So that anthropology requires you to really tease and dismantle systems of oppression. So of course I was needing to understand, what is home for me? Where does that lie? Is it really a land that I go back to? Is it forcing myself, if you will, to accept a land that doesn't accept me? What is it? And so in pushing back these narratives of home and returning, I started to sit with conversations of what people say, like other immigrants say when they want to go back home, right? They think of lineage and ancestry. They think of a sort of regeneration that happens, like I feel whole again. These are some of the things that immigrants say when wanting to return to their homes, their homeland. I feel a sense of self, of love. Language is important. And so in trying to reauthor my experience as an immigrant, I realized that all of those pieces that I just mentioned, I got that from my mother, from my actual mother. And so for me, it became like, well, in that case, my mother is my country.
Mm.
She is what I go to feel a sense of self, to keep my mother tongue alive, because we're in the United States. So, I mean, I am residing in Florida, so there is ample room for me to speak in Spanish, but it is important that I speak Spanish to my mom. So I have that connection. I have connection. My mom is the land that I connect to. She is who I go to regenerate, to keep language alive, to keep a sense of history alive, or her story alive, a sense of belonging, a mirroring, right? So yeah, if people ask me now where I'm from, I usually joke and I start first. I am from my mother. I am of my mother, which also then got me to my work on matriarchies and all that. So centering my mother as the point of return. She is what I return to feel a sense of whole and wholeness and home. So that's
I
how I
love that.
reconcile that.
That's so beautiful because we don't have we don't have that full authority to claim something that isn't necessarily ours. Because we haven't lived on that land or we don't have vivid memories. But it's definitely in our body and yeah, holding on to that language that was passed down to us is a connection with our home, whatever that feeling of home is, which is our mother. I was counting to 10 and then 20 to 30 till my kids to sleep last night in Lao. And I just felt my mother. Instead
Yeah.
of counting in English, I said, I'm gonna count in Lao, and I just felt my mother. It's just like I spoke my mother through me,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
I
that's so
felt
beautiful.
that. Um, and I think it's beautiful too to keep that language in which,
Mhm.
of course, the pressures that are around us are trying to get rid of that for us. But once they get rid of our language, we're we don't own also in some way English, right? We'll
Yeah.
always, it's in some weird way the way we're put, like we'll always be inferior. So it feeds
Mhm.
into this not enoughness, this extra layer, this very big extra layer.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. When we arrive here for whatever reason, uh, in my case, I didn't have a choice. I was a child. So when we arrive here, that assimilation, especially if you're young, is very, very, very real. And, language is the first thing that sort of um, lets the other inhabitants of this land know, oh, okay, you speak our language well, so you can sort of be you can stay. Not I was gonna say be one of us, but no, you're never one of us, right? You can stay. And like what you mentioned about feeling inferior because we never speak it properly or we have to really, really learn it in a particular way. I think I that is part of the feelings I need to go with the assimilation because otherwise who would give up their mother tongue in order to feel part of something, right? I think it's part of the psychological work that happens in the assimilation process, which is terrible. And it's also part of the imperialist agenda, right? To erase you. We erase your language, we are erasing a part of you. You're erasing access to what you left behind, right? In that context. As an adult now, and after all my work, well, that's why I push back on language. Pushing back on language for me, especially English, um, is one of the most radical things that we can do as immigrants. And honoring our sense of translation, of being in translation, not as something, as a negative thing that a lot of mono uh, people that speak one language uh, would say, especially the dominant language here in the United States, would say, speak English as sort of like an insult, right? I feel that speaking many languages and having that ability to really sit in that in-betweenness, in one of your previous episodes, we talked about that in-betweenness is actually a gift. And so I honor that ability to be in the state of translation always, because what I feel is that it gives me so much access to different cultures, to this culture. It gives me access to connecting in different ways that I know that somebody that speaks just one language, especially the dominant oppressive language, I mean, right now English is the colonizer's language, right? So let's just say it as it is. Only speaking that language, I feel that it is not a plus. Um, we, the immigrant, because we are in translation, I feel that we actually expand on English in such an incredible way. We open up that language to its possibilities. In another episode, you also talked about the fluidity of language. Language is inherently fluid because it's spoken by many, many people. The question we need to ask is who is killing its fluidity? Who is impeding its